What happened when a teenage legal prodigy took on a corrupt landlord? The answer ignited a nationwide movement for justice and inspired thousands to stand up for their rights. In the quiet suburbs of Portland, Oregon, 17-year-old Alexis Moore was far from ordinary. Growing up under the care of her grandmother, a retired teacher named Evelyn, Alexis demonstrated exceptional intelligence from a young age. By 7, she was devouring legal textbooks for fun, and by 12, she was out-arguing college students in debate competitions. Despite her brilliance, Alexis preferred to stay under the radar, shunning attention to focus on her studies and helping her community. Evelyn, a firm believer in humility and purpose, constantly reminded Alexis to use her gifts to make a difference. While her peers were worried about prom and weekend parties, Alexis spent her free time studying case law and assisting neighbors with legal paperwork. Little did anyone know, this unassuming teenager was preparing to take on challenges that would not only change her life, but inspire a nationwide movement for justice. One afternoon, while helping her grandmother Evelyn carry groceries to their modest home in Portland, Alexis Moore overheard a heated conversation in a small neighborhood convenience store. A distressed single mother, Teresa Hall, stood at the counter with tears streaming down her face, pleading with the cashier about her landlord's sudden eviction notice. "I've paid every cent on time," Teresa said, her voice trembling. "He says I broke the lease, but I swear I didn't. It's just me and my 2 kids." Alexis stopped in her tracks, her sharp mind immediately honing in on the injustice. She approached Teresa outside the store, introducing herself with a kind but firm demeanor. "Ma'am, I couldn't help but overhear. Do you have any documents? Your lease agreement, proof of payments?" Teresa hesitated, her eyes wary. "I do," she said softly, clutching her toddler's hand. "But you're just a kid. What can you do?" Alexis smiled, the glint of determination in her eyes unmistakable. "I may be young, but I've studied cases like yours. If you let me, I think I can help." Teresa looked doubtful but desperate, and she handed Alexis a worn folder filled with papers. That night, Alexis sat at her kitchen table, poring over the documents. Her keen eye quickly caught inconsistencies in the landlord's claims. She found clauses in the lease that directly contradicted his accusations. By dawn, Alexis had drafted a letter on behalf of Teresa, demanding the landlord halt the eviction and warning of legal consequences. Evelyn watched from the doorway, proud but concerned. "You're stepping into a big fight, Alexis," she said. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" Alexis nodded firmly. "If I don't try, who will?" The landlord ignored the letter, forcing Alexis to escalate the matter. She filed a case in small claims court, assisting Teresa every step of the way. Word of the teenager lawyer spread quickly through the neighborhood, and soon reporters began to take notice. Cameras flashed outside the courthouse on the day of the hearing, their lenses fixed on Alexis, who walked beside Teresa with calm confidence. Inside the courtroom, the landlord's high-priced attorney sneered as Alexis approached the plaintiff's table. "This is a waste of the court's time," he scoffed, addressing the judge. "A teenager pretending to practice law." But Alexis was undeterred. When it was her turn to speak, she dismantled the landlord's case with precision, citing housing laws and precedents with the authority of a seasoned attorney. Gasps rippled through the room as Alexis presented evidence that not only exonerated Teresa but implicated the landlord in unethical practices. The judge, visibly impressed, ruled in Teresa's favor, halting the eviction and ordering the landlord to compensate her for damages. As the gavel struck, applause erupted from the gallery. Teresa hugged Alexis tightly, tears streaming down her face. "You saved us," she whispered. Outside the courthouse, reporters crowded around Alexis, their questions flying. But Alexis remained composed. "This isn't about me," she said. "It's about standing up for what's right. Justice doesn't care about age. It cares about truth." It was the first of many battles, but Alexis knew it wouldn't be the last. The day of Teresa Hall's court hearing against her landlord became a spectacle the small courthouse in Portland had never seen before. Reporters swarmed the steps, eager to capture a glimpse of Alexis Moore, the 17-year-old legal prodigy who had dared to challenge a powerful landlord. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with chatter as curious spectators, legal professionals, and skeptical onlookers gathered to see if the teenager could deliver. As Alexis entered with Teresa, the room fell silent. Dressed in a simple blazer and skirt, Alexis carried herself with a quiet confidence that belied her years. Across the courtroom, the landlord sat with his attorney, a towering man named Richard Graves, known for his ruthless tactics and condescending demeanor. Judge Hamilton, a sharp-eyed man with a reputation for fairness, called the courtroom to order. Graves wasted no time, rising with a smirk. "Your Honor, before we begin, I must question the credibility of this so-called representative," he said, gesturing toward Alexis. "She's not an attorney. This is a mockery of the court." Murmurs rippled through the audience, but Alexis remained unfazed. She stood and addressed the judge with calm authority. "Your Honor, the law allows individuals to represent themselves or others in small claims court. I am fully prepared to present my client's case." Judge Hamilton nodded, silencing Graves with a sharp glare. "Proceed, Ms. Moore," he said. Graves began with a barrage of accusations, painting Teresa as a tenant who had knowingly violated her lease. He presented doctored photographs and vague testimony from the landlord, trying to cast doubt on her integrity. Alexis listened intently, taking meticulous notes, her face betraying no emotion. When it was her turn, Alexis rose and approached the bench with poise. "Your Honor, I'd like to present evidence that directly refutes the defendant's claims," she said, holding up a stack of documents. One by one, she laid out her case, proof of Teresa's timely payments, contradictions in the landlord's statements, and lease clauses that nullified his eviction notice. The courtroom hung on her every word. Graves, now visibly irritated, interrupted. "Your Honor, this is ridiculous. She's cherry-picking details and twisting the facts." Alexis turned to Graves, her voice steady. "If Mr. Graves has evidence to support his accusations, I invite him to present it. Otherwise, let's stick to the facts." The judge's gavel struck. "Mr. Graves, sit down. Ms. Moore, continue." As Alexis pressed on, she exposed a pattern of misconduct by the landlord, including evictions of other tenants under similar false pretenses. The climax came when she unveiled email records proving the landlord had conspired to push Teresa out to raise the rent for new tenants. Gasps filled the courtroom, and Graves fumbled to object. "Your Honor," Alexis said, her voice ringing with conviction, "this isn't just about one tenant. This is about abuse of power and the exploitation of vulnerable individuals. My client deserves justice." The judge leaned back, his expression thoughtful. After a moment of silence, he ruled in Teresa's favor. The eviction was halted and the landlord was ordered to pay damages. The room erupted in applause. Outside, reporters crowded Alexis, but she deflected their praise. "This is a victory for Teresa," she said firmly. "And for anyone who's ever been told they don't matter. Today, justice won." But as Alexis walked away, she knew this was only the beginning. The landlord's attorney shot her a glare that promised retaliation, and Alexis felt the weight of the battles still to come. Alexis Moore had barely caught her breath after winning Teresa Hall's eviction case when the repercussions began. The landlord, furious at the loss and public humiliation, had no intention of backing down. "You've made a powerful enemy," his attorney Richard Graves snarled as they exited the courthouse. Alexis, unfazed, responded with her characteristic calm. "Justice doesn't bow to power, Mr. Graves." The next morning, Alexis received an ominous call. A low voice warned, "You don't know what you've gotten yourself into. Back off or you'll regret it." Evelyn, her grandmother, found Alexis sitting at the kitchen table, her face pale but her resolve unshaken. "Grandma," Alexis said, "this isn't just about Teresa anymore. He's targeting anyone who challenges him, and I can't let him get away with it." The community, however, rallied behind Alexis. Neighbors began sharing their own stories of mistreatment by landlords like Teresa's, and reporters continued to spotlight Alexis as a rising voice for justice. Yet amidst the support, the threats escalated. Anonymous letters, strange cars idling near her house, and unsettling encounters in public became part of her daily life. One evening, while Alexis was working late in the small study Evelyn had turned into her makeshift legal office, the phone rang again. This time it was a whistleblower, an employee of the landlord who revealed disturbing details about a network of fraudulent companies, used to exploit tenants. "I have documents," the caller whispered. "But if they find out I spoke to you, I'm done." Alexis arranged a covert meeting at a local coffee shop, where the employee handed her a folder filled with damning evidence. The documents revealed the landlord's use of shell companies to inflate rent, falsify tenant violations, and siphon profits into offshore accounts. As Alexis reviewed the papers, her heart raced. This wasn't just one bad landlord. This was a systemic operation. Determined to expose the full extent of the corruption, Alexis shared her findings with local housing rights organizations. Together, they built a case not just against Teresa's landlord, but the broader network of exploitation. However, the stakes grew higher when Alexis discovered that Richard Graves had hired a private investigator named Lucas Harper, a man notorious for intimidation tactics. One night, as Alexis left a community meeting, Harper appeared in the parking lot, leaning against her car with a smug smile. "You've made a name for yourself, kid," he said, his voice dripping with menace. "But you're in over your head. Walk away before it's too late." Alexis stood her ground, her voice unwavering. "You can try to scare me, but the truth is on my side, and the truth always wins." The encounter only strengthened her resolve. Alexis worked tirelessly, preparing to take the broader case to court. Despite the mounting pressure, she knew she wasn't alone. Teresa, Evelyn, and a growing community of supporters stood with her. As the court date approached, the tension reached its peak. Reporters camped outside Alexis's home, the threats intensified, and whispers of bribery and coercion surrounded the defense's tactics. But Alexis was ready. The fight for justice wasn't just about winning. It was about sending a message that even the most vulnerable could rise against the powerful and prevail. As the broader case against Teresa Hall's landlord unfolded, Alexis Moore found herself at the center of an escalating storm. Armed with damning evidence of fraudulent practices tied to a network of shell companies, Alexis prepared for a courtroom battle unlike any she had faced. Yet, the opposition's tactics grew increasingly ruthless, blurring the line between legal defense and outright intimidation. 1 week before the trial, Alexis received a sealed envelope slipped under her door. Inside were fabricated photos and statements meant to discredit her. The message was clear: back off or be destroyed. Evelyn found Alexis staring at the evidence late that night, her hands trembling. "Grandma," Alexis whispered, "they'll stop at nothing." Evelyn placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "And neither will you," she said firmly. "They're scared because they know the truth is coming." As the trial began, the courtroom was packed with reporters, activists, and curious onlookers. Richard Graves, the landlord's attorney, came out swinging. His opening statement painted Alexis as a reckless teenager meddling in affairs beyond her understanding. "She's making accusations she can't possibly prove," he sneered. But Alexis had anticipated his every move. When it was her turn, she calmly laid out the evidence, each piece meticulously tied to the landlord's fraudulent operations. She revealed financial records, correspondence between the landlord and his shell companies, and even testimony from the whistleblower who had risked everything to come forward. The turning point came when Alexis presented a forensic analysis of the fabricated photos and documents used to intimidate her. "These were created to discredit me," she said, her voice steady. "But what they prove is the extent to which the defendants will go to hide the truth." Graves, visibly shaken, attempted to object, but the judge overruled him. The courtroom buzzed as Alexis called her final witness, a former tenant who testified about being wrongfully evicted under nearly identical circumstances. As the trial neared its conclusion, Alexis delivered a closing argument that resonated far beyond the courtroom walls. "This case isn't just about Teresa Hall," she said. "It's about every family who has been told they're powerless. Justice doesn't bow to intimidation. And today this court has the chance to show that no one is above the law." The judge announced a brief recess before delivering his verdict. Alexis returned to her seat, her heart pounding but her determination unshaken. She had fought for truth, and she knew the weight of her battle went far beyond one case. It was a fight for justice itself. The courtroom was silent as Judge Hamilton returned from recess, his expression unreadable. Alexis Moore sat beside Teresa Hall at the plaintiff's table, her hands clasped tightly together. The weight of the trial, months of threats, evidence gathering, and relentless advocacy hung heavily in the air. Finally, the judge cleared his throat, breaking the tension. After reviewing all evidence and testimony, he began, his voice firm. This court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Teresa Hall. The room erupted into cheers as Teresa gasped, covering her mouth in disbelief. The judge banged his gavel, calling for order. Furthermore, he continued, the court will refer the defendant for investigation into fraudulent business practices and evidence tampering. Let this ruling serve as a reminder that justice cannot be manipulated. Tears streamed down Teresa's face as she turned to Alexis, her voice trembling. "You did it," she whispered. "We did it," Alexis corrected, smiling through her own wave of relief. Outside the courthouse, a crowd of reporters and supporters awaited the duo. Cameras flashed as Alexis stepped forward, her voice steady despite the whirlwind around her. "This case wasn't just about one landlord or one family," she said. "It was about holding the powerful accountable and giving a voice to those who've been silenced. Justice is not a privilege, it's a right." As the media frenzy grew, so did the impact of the case. News of the victory spread, inspiring other tenants to speak out about their own experiences with corrupt landlords. Alexis received dozens of emails and calls, each one recounting stories of evictions, rent hikes, and systemic exploitation. It was overwhelming, but Alexis felt a renewed sense of purpose. With Evelyn's encouragement, Alexis began laying the groundwork for what would become the Justice Collective, a grassroots initiative dedicated to providing free legal aid to vulnerable tenants. Evelyn offered their home as the initial office, and volunteers from the community joined the effort. Among them was Teresa, eager to pay forward the support she had received. "You saved me," she told Alexis. "I want to help others like you helped me." The case had ended, but the fight was far from over. As Alexis and her growing team uncovered more cases of landlord misconduct, it became clear that this victory was only the beginning. With determination in her heart and a community rallying behind her, Alexis knew she was stepping into a larger battle, one that would challenge a flawed system and change countless lives for the better. The victory in Teresa Hall's case was only the beginning for Alexis Moore. What started as one teenager standing up against an unjust landlord quickly snowballed into something much larger. Emails poured in from across the country, tenants seeking advice, families sharing stories of mistreatment, and community organizers eager to collaborate. It was clear that Alexis had tapped into a deep vein of systemic injustice, and she was determined to do something about it. Working from the makeshift office in her grandmother Evelyn's home, Alexis officially launched the Justice Collective, a grassroots initiative dedicated to providing free legal aid to tenants facing eviction and exploitation. "This isn't just about winning cases," Alexis told her growing team of volunteers, which now included Teresa Hall as a community liaison. "It's about empowering people to stand up for themselves and creating a fairer system for everyone." The collective's first major campaign focused on a neighborhood where dozens of families were facing eviction due to a large-scale redevelopment project. The tenants, mostly low-income families, were being pushed out with little warning or compensation. Alexis and her team worked tirelessly to gather evidence, educate the tenants about their rights, and build a case against the developers. As the campaign gained traction, so did the threats. Alexis received another anonymous phone call late one night. "You don't know who you're messing with," the voice growled. "Back off, or you'll regret it." But Alexis had learned to channel her fear into determination. She shared the threat with her team the next morning. "They're scared because we're making an impact," she said, "and we're not stopping." The collective's efforts culminated in a community-led protest outside the developer's headquarters. Families held signs reading "Housing is a human right" and "Stop the greed." Local news outlets covered the story, amplifying the tenants' voices and putting pressure on the developers. Days later, the company announced a halt to the evictions and agreed to negotiate fairer terms for the tenants. The Justice Collective's success didn't go unnoticed. Donations began pouring in, allowing Alexis to expand the team and secure a small office space in downtown Portland. But the work came with a cost. Late nights, constant scrutiny, and the emotional toll of fighting a corrupt system began to weigh heavily on Alexis. One evening, Evelyn sat down beside her. "You're carrying a lot, Alexis," she said gently. "But remember, you're not alone. You've built something powerful and you've given people hope." Alexis nodded, a flicker of a smile crossing her face. "It's worth it, Grandma," she said. "If we can change even one life, it's all worth it." As the Justice Collective grew, so did its influence, becoming a beacon of hope for tenants nationwide. And though Alexis knew the fight for justice would never truly end, she embraced the challenge, one case at a time. Years after her victory in Teresa Hall's case, Alexis Moore had transformed from a determined teenager into a nationally renowned attorney and activist. The Justice Collective, which began as a small grassroots effort in her grandmother Evelyn's home, had grown into a powerful organization with chapters across the country. They provided free legal aid, exposed corruption, and advocated for sweeping reforms in housing laws. Despite her success, Alexis remained grounded. She continued to meet with tenants, fight for justice in courtrooms, and mentor young advocates who shared her vision. The challenges were unrelenting: threats from powerful landlords, bureaucratic roadblocks, and the emotional toll of the work. But Alexis's unwavering belief in fairness kept her going. Her work inspired thousands, and her story became a symbol of hope, a reminder that one person, armed with courage and determination, could spark a movement and change lives forever. The story of Alexis Moore resonates deeply in 2025, a time when housing inequality remains a pressing issue. Her journey teaches us that change starts with courage and the willingness to stand against powerful systems. It reminds us of the importance of grassroots efforts like the Justice Collective, which empower communities to fight for their rights. As technology connects us more than ever, we can use it to expose injustices, amplify marginalized voices, and demand accountability. Alexis's story inspires us to believe that with determination and unity, we can tackle systemic challenges and create a fairer, more just society. Alexis Moore's fight for justice is far from over, and she needs your support to keep making a difference. Join her by advocating for housing reforms in your community, volunteering with organizations like the Justice Collective, or contributing resources to empower tenants. Share her story to inspire others to stand up against systemic injustices. What's next for Alexis? Expanding her efforts nationwide to tackle corruption on a larger scale. Your voice matters. Leave a comment with your ideas, encouragement, or strategies to strengthen her mission. Together, we can help Alexis build a future where fairness and justice prevail for everyone.